All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee, and we're meeting today largely to take up Bill 1322, which is the all-electric building code legislation, and we're going to also briefly get our next update on the master licensing agreement on 5G infrastructure. I'm going to try to log into my computer and filibuster a bit while we go here. I'd just like to make an overarching comment here, which is that the legislation, we've heard, for example, a very direct appeal from PEPCO that they would like to see a study conducted. There's going to be plenty of time to review a study at the council because this legislation only requires the executive to draft the building code. And then the building code has to come over to the county council in a couple years, and it has to be approved by the county council. So think of this as legislation phase one. Legislation phase two is receipt of the building code. And that's where a lot of the rubber hits the road in terms of specific trade-offs. And the council has the final authority on approving that regulation. So there will be a whole new process of discussion and evaluation. And there's plenty of time within that framework to receive the studies that have been proposed and consider them and weigh the implications. So I just want to, I don't think that's well understood. I think a lot of, I know not our industry stakeholders, but our other participants may think that this legislation will result in an all-electric building code being in effect soon. And that is a relative, relatively speaking, as it is drafted, it's 2024, I believe, is when we would need to receive it. And I think we're going to consider whether there's an alternative timeline. So, with that in mind, with having several years for any studies to be conducted and the implications for those studies to be weighed, I think that issue, the real issue, it's a real issue, as I said last time, that we know that electrification is a very powerful strategy to confront the climate crisis, but it's going to require more infrastructure. It's going to require us to do things differently, and there's no way to make that happen other than to get started. And so this bill is one of numerous initiatives required to make that possible. And there's federal and state investments that need to be made, and utility investments that need to be made, and ratepayer investments that need to be made. All the above have to be made in order to make it possible. And this is really a small piece of the puzzle. In some ways, it should be the easiest of all, because these are all buildings that haven't been built yet, and we know from studies that it's actually a lower cost of construction. You're not running gas lines throughout buildings. It's cheaper to create the building. It's an incremental change to the building landscape. Most buildings, all buildings are already built. This hasn't been applied to a single building that already exists. And decarbonizing the building sector is going to be 99.9% about existing buildings and not new buildings. So that's the heavy lifting that is ahead of us in the next couple years and the next 10 to 20 years to figure out how to achieve that in a manner that is fair and reasonable. And there's hundreds of complications to that. So I'm going to give up on logging into my computer. Well, I can't give up because that's where the packet is. So I'm going to turn it to you. I don't know if my colleagues want to make a comment. I'm going to turn it to you, Lavu. I'm in. All right. It was Joshua, for anybody who remembers War Games. Okay. All right. Lavu, thank you again for your great work. And why don't you take us into the packet and we'll proceed.
Sure. If the committee doesn't mind, I'm going to start by inviting DEP and DPS up here, because I'm sure you'll have some questions for them. So as you remember, we held a work session on October 17th. So today's packet focuses on remaining issues and questions that came up during that last work session. To start, there was some discussion about the intersection between BEPS, the IGCC, and this bill. I'm not going to read through that, but I wanted to note that that is in there in the packet to sort of address the intersection between the three, which I'm sure will come up as we work through the bill today. Next, there was a question at the last work session about the carbon intensity of the county's grid. Ms. Shaw had answered that question. Her answer was 100% correct. The current makeup for the RFC East is 50% gas, 36% nuclear, 8% coal, and the rest is renewables and other fuels. So I included some of the charts and graphs from the Maryland Department of Environment's report in the packet so that the committee and the council and public can see that information, because a big question has been, you know, we're going to do this decarbonization, but what does the grid itself actually look like?
Okay,
so that
and
I can pause there, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's an important issue, and you know, the big picture here is we want to clean up the whole grid. Like, that's the real challenge. And buildings are going to continue to run off of energy. So they need to be able to run off of clean energy. And that means that the energy that they're pulling off the grid has to be clean. So that's a multi-decade strategy. And you know, there's already a mandate for a 50% clean portfolio, but we're hoping that it'll go to 100% in the coming decades too. So anything executive branch would like to say about that? And if you'll introduce yourself, it's Brian, I think.
You turned it off.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. Third time's the charm. Brian Bomer, Department of Permitting Services. I manage the Sustainability, Energy, and Mechanical section of commercial building. My only addition to that statement is that in addition to decarbonization, there's also an emphasis of including renewable energies in the codes, in the forthcoming codes. So net zero energy is part of the climate action plan, and we will be using the codes in order to achieve that. So not only are we looking at ending decentralization of natural gas end use points, but we're also talking about renewable energy on site.
Right. Okay.
So the next issue raised in the packet is on page 4. The committee last time had asked if there are exemptions that exist in other jurisdictions that weren't currently in the bill. So I listed all of them. What I can do is after each one I can just pause if someone on the committee would like to add it or discuss it. First was commercial laundry and laundromats, which are not actually a separate use in the county zoning ordinance. The way the bill is structured, when uses are exempt, they refer to the zoning ordinance. So laundromats, commercial laundry, all fall under retail service establishment, which is a pretty broad definition. So a bit of a warning there if that one is added, that could cover a lot. The bill could, if this was something the committee wanted to add, you could say retail service establishment and then specifically say laundromats, but that's just a caveat if that was a use that you were interested in exempting.
Okay, so we would have to specify.
Yeah.
That, and have we heard from any operators?
Yeah, it was another jurisdiction had exempted them, but we haven't heard from that industry.
Okay. I mean, that's a real question. I mean, I think it's something we should be careful about, you know, but without having heard from any of the operators that there's a concern there, you know, it's hard to know. Are laundromat services presently using gas-fired equipment, or are they already using electric? I don't know. We don't know. So, okay. So we'll note that, and you know, for anyone who's paying attention, if there's a concern here, we'd like to hear from you.
So next, other jurisdictions specifically listed out breweries and distilleries. So those work interestingly in the county because a lot of breweries are under light manufacturing and production, and manufacturing and production is already exempt in the bill, but there is an additional use in the zoning ordinance for farm alcohol production, which can also include breweries and distilleries. So if you wanted to capture the entire industry, that's an additional use that could be added under the exemptions. which makes a lot of sense because manufacturing and production is already exempt, and another amendment coming up is already exempting farming, so this is somewhere in the middle.
I think that was our intent, colleagues? Agreed? Great. And I just want to make another point about the laundromat. Again, this legislation does not mean that the regulation that we receive couldn't propose exempting laundromats, for example. It does not prohibit the building code from doing that, right? Or how would it be if in the course of working on this through the regulatory process, we learned that this is a real issue and it's something that needs a different timeline? How would we address that? Can I ask DPS for their comment here?
Well, so I'll start by saying because the regulations will be sent over as Method 2 regulations, and the council has to approve those, if the regulation itself said we're going to exempt laundromats and the council
Right.
agreed, it would be adopted as part of that
It would be
regulation
exempted
since
by
council has to
legislation.
vote on it.
But the fact that it's not exempted doesn't mean that it couldn't be exempted or a different timeline put in place in the regulation that actually implements the bill.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. We're going to talk about a waiver in item 4, so that might be
Right.
the more appropriate place for this. If we were to opt for that, I think it makes sense, and I don't want to preempt that part of the conversation, but I just want us to be clear, the council could, the law is requiring the executive to do something, and it's pretty specific in what the executive is required to do. It's not clear to me that the executive would be able to send something over that exempted something that we didn't exempt. Now, the council could then take the executive's Method 2 regulation that wasn't exempted and amend it, I would think, but
Well, we can't amend.
we can't amend a Method 2.
Can't amend Method
We have to,
2,
we can
correct.
request an amendment.
You'd have to
We
approve or
could say we're not going to
disapprove.
approve it unless you change it, and then the executive will have fulfilled because originally sent the Method 2. But could you clarify? Because I think that I'm not sure I
Okay, well, let's
agree with the point that you have made. If we have a law that we're putting forward now that says the county executive must, by date certain, do result certain, the executive, and then we have certain exemptions that are in there, the executive really is not being provided with the discretion that you're describing, where the executive could exempt additional things unless we provide that.
Right, there'd be a, I don't say procedural issue, but because the council has to approve or disapprove, if the regulation said included laundromats, I do believe, and I can double check this, but my understanding would be the council could still approve those regulations with that in there, or disapprove and send it back to the
But
executive to
could a
take it out.
resident challenge the fact that the regulation didn't follow the law? Because the law,
If it's silent to it, though, he can, my understanding is if it's silent to it,
it's all electric
well,
building standards.
All right, I may have taken us down a rabbit hole
Yeah,
here.
we should find out. We should be sure.
So we'll look into that issue because it's an important one, but.
Yeah,
the point
and I'm
is-
not necessarily disagreeing, I just think it's important if we say something in the committee that it be accurate and that we flesh it out. So
Agreed.
I just wanted to note that. So
Fair
it'd be
enough.
helpful to get a clarification on that. If there's an additional exemption, for instance, that is determined, does the executive have the authority
To propose that.
to
in the
propose it to the
in
council
regulation.
in the regulation?
I can follow up on the process of how that would work, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Thank you.
because I would think that it would be similar to like the levels, right? Like we're saying certain things, but they're going to come back with some decisions that they think they should make. We'll either agree with or disagree with. An additional decision point could be, we also think you should exempt X, Y, and Z. But we should check the process. But
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Because I just think it's important, the bill is not saying the executive must come up with building standards. We're saying the executive must come up with building standards that accomplish X with the exemptions of Y and Z. And that is from a statutory, situation, that's different. So I just think that needs to be fleshed out. So I'll just yield back.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll keep going.
Next up was hospitals. So, confirming farm alcohol production.
Correct.
Okay. Also, so there's going to be a lot of various amendments coming up. I don't know if the committee would like to vote as they come up or at the end.
Yeah, I
can
think
list
we'll
them
go
all.
as they come up. Thank you.
Okay. So next was hospitals. A lot of jurisdictions just fully exempt hospitals. The way this bill was drafted, the emergency backup system of the hospitals would be exempt under the current draft. So the proposal here would be adding, just exempting hospitals wholesale. When the bill was drafted, in conversations with DPS and DEP, the idea was there's no reason to exempt the whole building when you can just do the emergency backup systems. But some jurisdictions did go the alternate route.
I'll say I'm comfortable exempting them entirely, noting that we've just built 2 new hospitals in this county, and I don't know when there's going to be another new hospital built. It could be a really long time.
And just to clarify, I do think exempting hospitals holistically is acceptable because the emergency backup system to power an entire hospital may be burdensome. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a good point, right. It's a lot of generators. Okay, thank you.
Do we have any sense of, we just built a hospital not too long, a couple of them.
Germantown and White Oak.
Yeah. What are those systems are they using now? Do you know?
I don't, but traditionally hospitals used on-site combined heat and power, so they'll actually generate their own electricity because they use the waste heat for steam. I'm not sure if the 2 hospitals that we've recently built in Montgomery County have that feature or not, but it's common. But it's a mixed use, or mixed fuel system.
I'm sure they're trying to achieve some. I mean, I'd be curious just to know. I agree with this exemption, but just to know, I'm sure there's some best practice in new hospital building that they're trying to achieve some level of efficiency. So it'd just be good to note that maybe. And since we have 2 brand new ones, what has happened?
And to my colleague's point, they still have to meet the current building codes,
right,
including the IGCC, so there's efficiency requirements there.
Okay, thank you. So I'm fine with exemption.
Agreed. All right, unanimous.
Next was buildings used to treat sewage or food waste. So this is another very specific one that comes up in other jurisdictions as well. So I wanted to list it here in this list of other exemptions that exist. And I guess I'd defer to DP and DPS on how those are treated currently, or what they run on currently.
Again, my assumption is it's a mixed fuel scenario for the high temperatures and the amount of volume that they treat. So we would be okay with that.
Okay. No objection?
Sorry, no objection to exempting them, right?
No objection to exempting.
Well, I think I will just note on all these exemptions to council, to the county executive staff, similar to the point we raised of what if we're silent on an issue of an exemption, once we figure that issue out, laundromats, being the example. But I mean, if you find new information about a particular type of facility or something, I think we should be actively looking into that. I don't want to. For me, it's not. It's fine to look at what other jurisdictions have done and get some ideas, but I don't really. I'd like to know what's actually happening, like a little more information than we seems to have today, of what is the capability. What is the standard, up-to-date, most current practice? What's possible? Again, this is going to be a couple of years out, right? So I would just encourage you all to look into that as we're combing through the exemptions, even if they are included in what we passed right now. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the opposite, as far as I can tell, just based on the way statute works and regulations work, should be true. That our exemption reduces the burden on the executive from being required to include it, but it doesn't prevent the executive from coming forward, does it?
Well, from building an all-electric, I mean, these are public sector buildings anyway.
Right. I mean, these are. I'm saying so. It wouldn't prevent. Like, the regulation is the minimum standard that you have to follow in order to meet the law. Like, we're talking about buildings that the executive branch is responsible for, right?
At least in part.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear on this. Like, the question is, if the county government is serious about moving forward with its climate goals, it's not like in this case we're prevented from doing it. We're just saying that there could be some challenges with how this works in practicality, and we're not requiring it to say that we'd be in violation of the law if we didn't.
So let me see if I understand it correctly. So the committee is going to say, go ahead and exempt, these buildings, meaning the standards don't have to include them or aren't going to include them, but that doesn't stop the executive, obviously, because they're public buildings, from making them all electric.
I would like to look into that further, because the language in the law does say all electric building standards do not apply to new construction, major renovations, or additions in these lists that we're adding to. And so I do think that we would be challenged if we presented regulations that then later included those, that we would be in conflict with the law. So I think I hear what you're saying.
There's two aspects to this, just to be clear. One is the regulation, and one is however you choose to be the landlord of a property, or the owner of a property. So I think one is the question of what can or can't be included in a regulation. If it's expressly exempted, are you able to include it? We're saying you don't have to include it because it's exempted, but can you include it if you choose? That it, should be looked into on the flip side. But what I was expressing was these are largely public facilities that we're talking about. If the executive branch wanted to have a facility that went above and beyond a standard or wasn't included in a standard and wanted to be held to that standard, there's nothing stopping the executive branch from moving that forward. I just wanted to note that in this particular, that's not true of laundromats. We're not in the laundromat business, so that's different. But I just wanted to note
Just
that.
as any building owner could do an all-electric building now, and some do. Many do, actually. Okay.
Okay. And then the last one was accessory dwelling units, which I think the committee discussed last time and decided did not want to exempt accessory.
I do have a question, though. This would probably go to DPS. If you had radiators in your house, fired by a gas furnace, and you were going to convert your basement to an accessory dwelling unit, and it was on the same system, basically, it wasn't a different heating system, would this prevent you from using that heating system?
That may be considered alteration, so not new construction if it's in the basement of an existing building.
Oh,
Right? Splitting hairs here. This is where it gets complicated, right?
right.
But in my mind, I would consider that existing building. So it's an alteration to existing building.
Okay. Because a detached unit, I think, there's no problem saying, it has to be all electric. They're all electric anyway.
Right.
They're going to use, mini splits or those kinds of systems.
I think the challenge is, if and when we make a decision on thresholds, that could then trigger. But if that's the case, it could be looking at triggering the whole house. So again, it's very situational.
Okay. So situational, no exemption for accessory dwelling units. It's also subsumed within the renovation issue. And I think that should cover it. Okay? So we're not exempting accessory dwelling units, and I'll say with the expectation that they are contingent, like to the extent that they're part of the house, the main primary house, they're subsumed under the alteration clause or requirements. To the extent that it's a new structure in the back, we're saying not exempt, has to be all electric. And I'm fine with that. Okay.
So the next issue raised is there was a question of other jurisdictions have a waiver process like spelled out in their legislation. And first there was a question of does the council want a waiver process and does it need to be in the bill or should it be in the regulation? So DPS actually has an existing process called a code modification, which is pretty similar, but the applicant basically shows they can't meet this because of some undue hardship. Usually the way code modifications are incorporated into our building code, why DPS can do them, is they're part of the international code councils that we adopt regularly. Because there is no International Code Council electrification code yet, council staff's recommendation here is to just explicitly say in the bill that the executive can include code modification language in the regulation.
Okay, agreed.
And just to expand on the code modification process, one of the things that I want to make sure we're all aware of is that this is not a waiver. So we use the word modification very judiciously, that it is required to provide a compensatory action. So what we are looking for is, so I can't under X, Y, and Z meet the code, but I can do other things that provide a similar path of compliance. So in this case, I do want it noted that this is not a waiver, but this is an option for a project to provide additional methodologies to meet. So coming up with an example, I saw that one coming. This is a very tough one to give an example of, because we have to kind of cook up a scenario. So let's say a laundromat, for instance, comes in and it's not part of the exemptions. They would be required to sit down and explain to us why a laundromat can't be all electric, so energy intensity requirements for drying clothes. And so what we would ask is the code modification committee is compensatory action. So ultimately that is on the designer to bring forth, but what I could imagine them saying is something along the lines of, we're going to max out the on-site renewable energy on the roof as a method to try and balance that. Or we're going to buy renewable energy credits within the PJM
This
grid.
isn't a net zero standard, but essentially you'd be adopting a net approach to that modification.
It could be an example for this particular situation. I mean, there are other options. Maybe. Yeah, I don't want to put those words in writing because it's not saying that that's the only option, but that could very well be a scenario that we would accept. But they don't just get a waiver. I think that's important, that we're looking for the compensatory action.
Yep, okay.
Sorry, so that's 3-0 on the code modification language?
Yeah.
So the next big one is major renovations. There's been a lot of discussion since the last work session on whether major renovations should be removed from the bill. Highlighting here that we do have the BEPS legislation that applies to existing buildings. National building code trends are moving towards applying to existing buildings as well. So holding off on major renovations at this time would allow some additional time to figure out exactly how this would work, particularly in mixed-use buildings, buildings that are commercial and residential. To highlight some of the things that came up in the major renovations issue, I believe the next 2 issues raised in the packet also talk about some of the complications with major renovations. So the recommendation at this time is to remove major renovations from the bill, and then related to that is considering removing additions as well, so that the bill will only apply to new construction. So that's the big question of the day, I think, before the committee.
Okay. So this would narrow the scope of the bill so that it's purely new construction. And so for those who want us to tackle renovations and additions, it doesn't mean that in the future the council can't consider doing that, whether it's legislative change or a new proposed building code. Either way, it doesn't prohibit the council from doing that. But it's been a challenge to figure out how to do it now. I'll say that. Any comments here from DPS, DEP?
I agree wholeheartedly with what Libu said, that there are many avenues that Montgomery County is taking to push electrification, decarbonization, and net zero energy forward. So the codes, for instance, it again is a national trend, or this language. I'm on the 2024 Energy Code Committee myself, and it was probably 3/4 of the conversation in preliminary code hearings. And so we do anticipate this being a national issue, and we'll be able to enforce it through codes over the next 3 code cycles, staying in line with the Climate Action Plan goals of 2030.
Comments here. Okay, so again, staff's recommendation is to remove major renovations. That's number 5, and additions, right? And that's number 5.
Sorry, yeah, the additions wasn't in the packet. That's something that was thought of after the packet was put out, that if you're removing major renovations, a lot of those issues would apply to putting an addition on as well. So if you're going to remove one, it makes some sense to remove both.
And I will just say, as a practical matter, I think probably most people, when they do additions, they're doing all electric anyway. You know, it's not that common to build more radiators into an addition off the back of your house. It's just really expensive, and it's just not that common. So I don't think this is a huge issue personally, but.
Yeah, one of the issues that we talked about last time, and we got into all of the questions, the common ownership communities, one person makes a change, a certain number of people make a change. Some common ownership communities, you offer options to everybody, and only some take you up on it, and everybody's in a different situation. So we talked quite a bit about that, and that's on the modification, major renovation dynamic. And then we did talk, just to rehash the conversation before, quite a bit on the additions. For instance, adding a first floor bedroom for aging in place, and whether that would trigger in an older house the whole house, needing to come in with a whole new, heating and cooling system, which would be exorbitantly expensive, versus just the bedroom and the bathroom on the first floor that's being added. Would that just have to be electric? And I agree that, if it's just the unit, which I think would be the more reasonable option, that is overwhelmingly likely to not have a radiator. If somebody is building a first floor bedroom and bathroom, I don't think we need to, I think there's less need to require that, because I think that's already going to happen. The question is, at what point do we trigger somebody who's aging in place having to redo their whole house and making that extremely expensive endeavor, or having elderly parents live with you in an intergenerational household, et cetera. So I think if we were going to do this, we would have to spend a lot of time to figure out how. My personal view is we're not in any position now to work this through today. And if we don't work it through today, it's not going to have time to even have a shot at getting through the full council with 1 or 2 meetings left to consider it. And so we either can hold the whole bill up and flesh out all of these decisions and wait, or we should remove these, stick to the easier, clearer, to define issues and move forward. So I would be comfortable removing these in the interest of moving something forward.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I agree, we have a lot of tools in the toolbox. The goal is to electrify MoCo, right, as the signs say, right in front of me, right? Give you a shout out there. And that would include commercial, and it would include renovations as well. I agree that under BEPS, under the code, as was mentioned by the executive staff, we have other tools to do it, to get there. Also, Councilmember Reamer mentioned, it doesn't prevent us from coming back after we have more information and can delve into it more. But I do think it's important to say that, that is the goal, and that's where we want to ultimately get. But we need to do it, in a pace and make sure we have all the things figured out. So I agree that removing it is fine as well.
I agree, but I would like to ask DPS and DEP to put a lot of thought into how it could be done, and on the timeline of this whole process in the next few years as it moves forward, bring us a really well thought through framework for how it could be done for the council to consider. And you'll be going through your own building code updates anyway. It's part of your natural cycles, but I think the council would welcome a specific plan from you to tackle this tough topic, and and then it could be considered at that time. But we can't really do it any faster than you can figure it out, so please figure it out and then come back to the council. All right. And we could have the county executive send us a memo on that. That'd be fine. Okay. We'll keep
So
going.
the next 2 pages of the packet were about things that would have applied to major renovations, so I'm assuming we want to skip past those then. So next, I'm going to go through the remaining amendments. So this is page 7. So first, Councilmember Reamer had asked to exempt restaurants and restaurants with drive-throughs in addition to commercial kitchens.
I mean, I'll say I think we should do this. I do think that over the long term, restaurants can go all electric, but you know, I don't think that it's a common practice yet, and I think that we ought to be really careful about how we proceed here. So, you know, I think that this one is a little bit ahead of where the market is. And I think I think future council should take this issue up. So, any comments here?
Yeah, I have just a question. I'll make sure everybody's on the same page here. So when we talk about restaurants, we talk about commercial kitchens. So when a restaurant comes in for a permit, they have to identify the spaces within that restaurant. So you have your dining area, you have your back office spaces, you have your bathrooms, and you have your commercial kitchen. So what we were proposing initially is that the commercial kitchen portion, which is the energy intense portion of that construction project, would be exempt. But then the other spaces, such as the dining room and the bathrooms and the office, which are traditionally treated just like any other commercial space, would not be exempt. And so my challenge, I guess, is understanding what portion of the restaurant outside of the commercial kitchen would struggle with electrification, given that it's a couple of hot water faucets and a furnace maybe that could be electric, easily could be easily electric.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that too, but isn't the flip side true? Like, is there if the commercial kitchen is being exempted, and we're talking about new construction here, I think this is different if we're talking about a renovation to an existing, you know, first floor of a commercial building that's going to be used as a restaurant. It's a 70-year-old commercial building, residential building, or commercial building, or office building. But is the likelihood? I mean, is the concern that you have that the rest of the building wouldn't be electric?
I think it provides a loophole for the rest of the restaurant to say, I'm not required to meet the electrification code, so they could space heat with natural gas, they could water heat with natural gas, they could put ornamental natural gas lights out front. I mean, we're not telling them they can't do anything, or they can do whatever they want because we've exempted the restaurant. I guess that'd be my challenge.
To clarify a bit too, the way the bill is written, the entire restaurant would be exempt because the definition of a restaurant includes the space where people are sitting and eating, right, and where they're cooking. So the way the bill is drafted, because you're exempting the whole use, and that's how that use is defined, the whole restaurant is going to be exempt.
And I think focusing on commercial kitchen allows us some flexibility with non-traditional spaces. So a school that has a commercial kitchen in it, that commercial kitchen would be exempt because of the intensity requirement there. A private office building that has a cafeteria in it, much like the building across the street here, that commercial kitchen would be exempt, but the rest of the building, to be expected, would be all electric. And so I think we're just asking that rationale to be extended into restaurants. These restaurants are getting bigger. Some restaurants are huge, and we see 30,000 square foot restaurants occasionally. And so we would be saying under this modification that all 30,000 square feet would be exempt, when really all we need to do is focus on that high intensity portion of the commercial kitchen, in my opinion.
Are those areas getting heated in a way that, using gas now?
The choice is there. I mean, there's nothing saying they can't use gas furnaces and gas water heaters. But if we just exempt the commercial kitchen portion, the bill would require the water heating for non-kitchen use and the space heating for non-kitchen use to be electrified.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about a restaurant with an open kitchen? So you have a commercial kitchen that's open, that presumably the heating and cooling system is the same.
They are not. So under current codes, those are separate areas and are dealt with independently. So there's air curtains and other technologies that can be used to sort of separate those spaces. But no, they are not communicating. It's
So it
a
has to be
fire.
on a separate system.
Right, they have separate, yes, they're zoned, they have separate equipment, they have separate ventilation. We fire separate. It's essentially a fire safety issue.
Okay, so if there's a fire in the kitchen, it
stays
could
in
be
the
suppressed
kitchen. Correct.
from the crowd, essentially, from the tables.
Yeah.
Okay. I think your argument has two sides of it. You're saying it shouldn't be that hard to follow. I think for that reason, I don't think that it's as urgent an issue. I'll yield to the sponsor of the bill and the sponsor of the amendment for how he would like to handle, and I'm happy to oblige. I mean, I understand the points that you're making, but I also think the very rationale that you're saying, I don't think this is too much of a burden. I think you could also make the rationale that I don't think that we're getting a lot of benefit here either. So I'll yield to the double sponsor here, and happy to oblige.
I want to ask Levu for some clarification here. So this is a zoning code issue. It's my understanding what Brian is saying, it may or may not match how the zoning code.
Correct. The building code and the zoning code unfortunately do not always match up perfectly, so there would be some wordsmithing required to draft this amendment if you were to do only the kitchen part, because you'd have to refer to the use and then say only the cooking or only the kitchen portion. You'd have to get pretty prescriptive on how you're breaking that piece out, which
commercial
is why
kitchens
council
are-
staff's recommendation was to just exempt the entire space.
Right, because commercial kitchens are a use that has their own definition.
Yes,
It does
commercial
not,
kitchens have a whole separate use.
it's not the kitchen in a restaurant.
Right.
It is a use where the kitchen is the only use.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a restaurant without customers, kind of, in a way. So, okay, so I think the staff recommendation makes the most sense. We can tackle, Brian, the issue you're raising, when, again, nothing prohibits you from sending over additional changes that go further than this law, I think. So you can explain that down the road. So staff recommendation here.
You sound like, Brian, you wanted to say something else. So you have a 30,000 square foot, what is the juice? Is the juice worth the squeeze, to use Councilmember Friedson's
Yeah.
term and allude to what he just said?
How do you power the juicer?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if without some clarification, a restaurant will be covered by this, because the commercial kitchen does not exempt the restaurant.
Exactly.
Right.
The commercial kitchen, if you leave it the way it was introduced, where it was just commercial kitchen, restaurants would need to follow the
So no more gas
all-electric building.
stoves and appliances
Exactly.
inside restaurants' kitchens.
Well, that's not
No,
what
not at all. Sorry. Let's all get, again, I think we want to get on the same page here. When a project comes in, they define the commercial kitchen space because it has code standards and regulations it has to meet for fire safety and for occupancy, right? We don't say a restaurant is a commercial kitchen because you're not allowed to have as many people in a commercial kitchen per square foot as you are, say, a dining room. So we break sections of the project out for use space to define them for their intent, right? Because you don't want you don't want the most restrictive definition of a space like the commercial kitchen to apply, because then you wouldn't allow anybody in the building. And so when a project comes in, they define the commercial kitchen, right? We know what that means from a code perspective. So we're just asking that the exemption apply to that space. My belief is that if you open it to restaurants, you're just providing a loophole that creates confusion from an enforcement perspective. So where are these thresholds defined, right? And so by saying a commercial kitchen, Department of Permitting Service knows exactly what that means and can absolutely apply the exemption to that space. The hot water that occurs in the kitchen is for kitchen use. The hot water that occurs over in the bathrooms for public use is happening on its own. And we're just asking to make sure that we're aware of that separation and that we apply the electrification code to the things that make sense.
So, Ms. Nadeau, how would you do what is being described if we wanted to do that?
Right, so this is that building code, zoning code disconnect. Currently, anything that meets the definition of a commercial kitchen under the zoning ordinance, which is slightly different than the way it looks when the building permit application comes in, is exempt. If you want to break out restaurants, so only the kitchen portion of a restaurant is exempt, then language would need to be added to the bill that says, you know, these standards don't apply to restaurants, and I think it was including restaurants with a drive-through. You would specify to the cooking portion
Right. A clause.
of a restaurant.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think we can work through those words
It'd be like
and
the
get it.
portion of a restaurant used for cooking.
That is deemed
Yeah.
the commercial kitchen.
I'd be
right?
open to that. I mean, I used to, when the little guy was talking, it just made me think when I was his age, I used to go to Horn and Horn Smorgasbord. Anyone remember that? Okay, it was not very good, but I went there a lot. And it was on New Hampshire Avenue. It was a huge, think of Golden Corral times 10. And it was a huge space. It was on right at New Hampshire University. And very small kitchen area, but huge dining area. You know, like a lot of lights, a lot of stuff going on. So, not that those are the, you know, what we're trying to just tackle here, but to your point of there are some places that the kitchen area is a relatively small contained place. So I'd be comfortable if we could figure it out to try to do it that way.
We can research and wordsmith.
I think the young man has won the day here.
Is it?
All right.
You remember that? It's probably, I don't know if they're still around, but don't go there. not a recommendation.
All right, well, if we could see that, please. Seems logical. I mean, I certainly understood the issue with restaurants to be the kitchen cooking equipment, not the heating for the dining area.
So, yeah, so just to clarify, the goal here is we're going to marry the permitting definition with the zoning code definition to exempt out the cooking area, which you feel very confident can be separated because that's how you view it from a permitting standpoint.
And what
I
I'm,
just want to make sure, because
Right.
I don't know anybody watching could have followed that conversation.
If you look at
So
other,
I just think it's important to summarize
Yeah.
what we're coming out of this.
absolutely. When you look at other
Make sure I
jurisdictions,
understand too, because I think I follow.
That's why you see the commercial kitchen specified in other jurisdictions, bills, and regulations, because that's, from a building perspective, a common term.
to help picture it, because what I imagine the way the bill will look like is right now the bill, when it lists exemptions, first there are systems, so that's where like emergency backup systems, those things are, and then there's the section exempting entire uses. So it might be that restaurants and commercial kitchens come out of the uses list and instead just describe the system, so then you move away from the zoning code.
Okay. Sounds
good.
Sounds good.
All right. So the next proposed amendment was actually a request from the Agricultural Advisory Committee, the Agricultural Preservation Advisory Board, and the Montgomery Agricultural Producers. And this was an exemption for agricultural buildings. And now I'm trying to find the language. So the way it would be written in the bill is you would exempt buildings used for farming or for agricultural purposes.
So it would still, you know, the house, would, a new house on an agricultural property would be covered, but the grain silo is going to have more flexibility, basically. I understand it's mostly about drying grain, and so we don't want,
Yeah.
wet grain.
And that's something that's used in other places in the zoning code, so it's not a whole new idea, as we often exempt the buildings used for farming.
It's also consistent with the manufacturing previously, because some of this is also preparing crops and products for market that are not captured in the manufacturing part of the code that are actually agricultural uses that might not have been captured but would be now captured here. So I think it would be helpful to include it.
And they may use propane or something now to, once a season, fire this equipment up or something. So, okay.
So you already voted on farm alcohol production, and then there had been new definitions for major renovations, but since that's coming out, I'll skip over that one as well. So the last proposed amendment was one by Councilmember Jawando about extending the deadline. Currently, these regulations would be due January 1st, 2024, and I believe the proposal is January 1st, 2025.
Yeah, and I can explain that. We've obviously heard from our friends at PEPCO and the about the PSC reports and other reports that are coming, that extending it a year as a minimum standard. Again, the executive branch here will be working on this in earnest. They're already working on it, I'm sure. But I think is trying to be sensitive to those concerns. Also some concerns raised by our labor partners, really legitimate concerns about the grid itself and the ability to withstand this type of change of electrification. So studies, concerns, but still keep us on track for a very important goal to have electrification. So I would like to, as was stated, propose that we move it 1 year to January 1st, 2025.
Okay, all right, no objection. I just want to say again, as I said earlier, one of the primary requests we've received from PEPCO is to consider this in light of a study that they would like to conduct. There's going to be plenty of time to do that. This code isn't going to be due to the County Council until 2025 if we accept this amendment, and that's plenty of time for any studies to be conducted and considered in the formulation of the regulations. So the issue of whether a study, whether we can adequately consider all of the studies that are going on in Maryland, frankly, I think it's really clear. We're going to have plenty of time to consider any studies that are going on in Maryland before the council receives this regulation, which the council can say that, we're not comfortable approving. We want to see changes. There's a negotiation process between the executive branch and the council to get a regulation like this approved. So it's not just so much that there's another bite at the apple, like there's another apple to come. So lots of issues will be addressed at that time.
Just wanted to confirm that this is not going to change the date. I think for affordable housing and private and public schools, the date was 2026 is when they need to start doing this, and I just want to confirm that that is not changing.
I'm comfortable making it be consistent if you're pushing this out a year, pushing those out a year. But if I think that makes sense.
And there's slightly different deadlines. So the first one, the 2024 to 2025, is when the regulations are due, and then the 2026 is when schools and affordable housing will have to start using them. The idea being they had a 2-year window to start.
Sure.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so
So
we'll push
push to
everything else
2027?
out that was contingent, yeah.
I'd like to bring up one point. Pushing it out to 2027 coincides with another code cycle, and there was already some projections to be pushing aggressively at that code cycle. So my concern is that we may be giving a little extra leeway in this bill when the building codes themselves might have been pushing more aggressively already. So I don't want to kick the can down even farther on something that was going to be
You're saying
addressed.
the green building code.
Yeah. Well,
Energy code,
Energy
IGC,
code.
green code.
you can send it sooner.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not
This is
setting
just-
ourselves up for
this
like
is
a...
just saying like absolutely by
Okay.
this time.
Perfect, thank you.
That's how I read it, Ms. Nadeau.
Yes.
And the council
Okay.
can decide if you've got all your ducks in a row, and the future council, which I hope to be on, voted today, so please vote. Last day early voting. We can consider that, So yeah. So I don't think it's an issue in that regard.
You can always turn your homework in early. Okay.
So that was everything in the packet. I did make a note of some questions and requests that were added in testimony that are there for your review. They were in the last packet as well. But otherwise, those are all the amendments that council staff and other council members and DEP and DPS had for the committee to decide.
All right. Okay. Well, appreciate this. We heard extensively from our utility sector partners last time, so appreciated that feedback, and I want to thank everybody for their engagement and participation. And we've amended this bill. I think it's hopefully it finds the right construction to help it move forward and get this full council to adopt it. We really only have 2 more council sessions. We have the 15th of November and the 29th of November. And then this council will not meet again. It'll be the next council. So I doubt we're going to take this up on the 15th. The plan has been to take it up on the 29th, and very much hope that we'll do that. So, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that also, I think, will give you, there's a couple of questions I had asked, if there's anything that you find out about any of the exemptions, anything between now and then, that gives some time for you to communicate that back. But I agree. I think, we've got to take an aggressive approach here. I appreciate the community's support. And, I saw a bit of good news the other day that maybe if we speed things up, we might survive, as far as the climate crisis, so that's better than what it was of that we definitely won't. And so I think that was meant to be hopeful, even though it might not have sounded like it. So we got to move fast. And I appreciate the community understanding that. I appreciate all our partners understanding that. And I appreciate the bill sponsor is proud to co-sponsor.
Thank you so much. Again, sorry, I said that we should take it up as a work session on the 15th and then vote on the 29th. I think people certainly want a chance to hear about it and absorb all of this. It's a complicated issue. All right, great. So, show of hands, all in favor of the amended legislation? Great, thank you. It's unanimous. Really appreciate my colleagues. Thank you so much. I think this is really important work, and this county can really be at the leading edge of something that's important and makes a big difference. So, thank you. We have one more item to go, but thank you to the executive branch for your knowledgeable participation. Really appreciate it. Thank you to CASA, who's here today, and the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, who is here today, and the restaurant sector, and the building sector, and the power and gas, and everybody. All right, welcome, Mitzi Herrera. No stranger to the County Council. We're taking up the master licensing agreement, which we are hoping will be receiving you'll be sending to the private sector partners your draft of your response, I guess, to their red lines. And I just want to preface my comment by reading, there was a piece today in the Washington Business Journal about how JBG Smith is building they've just lured a 5G, private 5G network company to National Landing, and they're going to build out a private 5G network in National Landing. That's the cutting edge. That's where things, 5G is unquestionably the future of communications, and And we can look to the epicenter of economic development in the region, and they're being aggressive, and they have the abilities to do that. I'm sure much of that will be internal on their buildings, but probably some of it will be external on the streets or on the roofs. So, here we are struggling. We're struggling to put our code into place, and we got the zoning text amendment passed. One of the pieces of it is this master licensing agreement, which is, the county owns the streetlights in the county, and this is in order for us to allow a private company to put an antenna on a streetlight, which would mean replacing the streetlight with a new streetlight that has an antenna on it. We only do that when we have a license agreement with that provider, so that we get paid. For example, right? I believe we collect rent from the providers when we allow them to put our equipment on, their equipment on our lights, just as one example. So we're trying to get this resolved. It has been, it's been moving at the speed of a 3G connection in the executive branch. So, Ms. Herrera, I'm glad you're here today. What update can you provide for us? And if you'll turn your microphone on, please.
Well, I'm happy to tell you that we are currently moving at the speed of light.
Oh, all right. Fiber optic connection
Yes.
here.
Yes. And our intention is to send out a draft next week in response to the industry that should be where the county, what we require.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so next week you're sending the response,
Well,
and how long do we expect there
They
to be
can
a
sign it.
resolution?
I mean, they could sign it.
Well, I know they could, but I mean, we're supposed to get a progress report. So, like, how far do we think the gap is based on what you're sending them back? Like,
Well, I would say that our position is it's our polls. This is what we require, and we're going to make them accessible. We've had the draft, which we thought was a fair draft. There were some comments that came in. We're incorporating what seems reasonable, and we're going to send it back, and we're ready to deal.
on a scale of 1 to 100, what's the likelihood within 2 weeks that there's a deal that is signed?
While I can't speak for the industry, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
I think they want. I think that there's a lot of interest in using our equipment. I think that what we propose is pretty reasonable, and I think that a deal can be done.
Okay, so you're sending next week. When do we expect to hear back an update of whether or not there was a response and what the response was?
That is dependent on the industry, but we certainly can let them know that you are anxious to get a resolution. They may, in fact, be watching this right now.
I imagine they are. I think maybe some even in the room. So you're going to send this to them what date? Next week? Like Monday, Friday? I'm just trying to give a reasonable time frame for when we would get a report back.
Well, Friday would be the very last day of the week, but
Well, but you're working at the speed of light, so I can't imagine you'd be waiting till Friday.
Well, we want to make that deadline, so it's definitely going to be before Friday or by Friday, and our goal would be to do it sooner than that.
Okay. We have a FED meeting on the 14th.
That's good update.
That's Monday the 14th. So we do have a, yeah. I'm looking at the schedule. Monday the 14th, we have FED, talking about MPDUs.
In the morning, yeah.
9:30 a.m. So since you'll be sending this out next week, the deadline to be in the packet for the 14th so that we can see what you've sent to them is like Thursday, right? I think, Boo. So we ask you to make that so it can be in the packet for the 14th.
We will. I can't speak for others, but I think that we can definitely try to do that.
You can definitely try to do that.
Definitely, maybe.
We started out moving at the speed of light, which was hard to reconcile with the way that the rest of this conversation has gone up to this point, but we were willing to give you some grace
Well,
there.
I can tell you this. In thinking through this, Friday, I believe the county is closed, so the likelihood that it goes out Thursday is probably pretty good.
Okay, I think the Fed
Right.
committee, and I'm seeing nods from colleagues, and based on prior conversations, is urging the executive branch to provide the red lines to us prior to the packet going out, so that rather than saying that the executive branch has failed to provide the committee with this before the meeting, that we can say that we have received it. I think that would be in everybody's best interest in the aura of collaboration. So I think that's what we're asking for. And then hopefully we'll get a response by the time we have the meeting that you can share with us.
So the 10th. Please pass the word along that the committee very much expects that the 10th, the red lines will be sent from the executive branch. You'll CC Ms. Nadeau and others at the council as appropriate, and we'll be able to post those for the Monday.
And if you could share that the Fed committee was doing that also in the interest of county employees not having to send this out on Veterans Day, which is a county holiday.
And I stepped out for a second. The red lines of the master licensing agreement
Yes.
is what we're assuming.
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes.
and could you just restate what you understand to be the outcome of this meeting? For the record, please.
It is the express desire of the Fed
Express
committee
desire. Yes, yes, it is.
Definitely going to try. That's
Yeah.
what we gotta do.
to get the red line back by Thursday so that it can be included in the packet for the Fed committee meeting on November 14th. And it is in all seriousness, the executive staff has been working not just diligently. There has been a lot of activity on this, and we intend to get it out next week. We will try to meet your packet deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. We'll see you on the 14th. And if we'll add that item, please, to the 14th. Thank you. All right, we are adjourned.